So that was quite the introduction. Thank you for that. We're gonna keep this quick. Well, not too quick, but very deep. And there's a lot of information that we're gonna go through. It really is a pleasure to be here with Michael and the team around suicide awareness. I suppose it was really personal experiences in my own life, and then in my time as a chaplain in the Navy that brought this very close to my heart as a topic. Before I keep going, my sound and visuals are okay? All right. I will speak for a little bit. What we're going to do is I will talk, and then I have two guests, Eric Adams and Edward Bodenheimer, that they'll pop on halfway through to share their personal experiences, and then they'll introduce themselves. So we're going to look through a little bit. Now, this can come across as very ambitious of what I want to do, to unveil the complexities of suicide. I want to give you a window into what happens, what the military culture is like, somewhat. A lot of things that we're going to talk about are applicable, and it was really interesting to hear what Danica was saying about a lot of organizations. We're going to see there's a lot of overlap. It's just different cultures the cultures are different. They have different expressions. So if you're not familiar with the military, we're going to give you a little window into how things work, things that are set up, maybe some of the triggers, and also I'll walk you through that. What does a chaplain do? And I love this, listening to Danica was very interesting, because I think the Department of Defense has a very interesting model, although there's been a lot of people that are trying to get rid of the chaplain corps from the different branches. But it's an interesting model because it's protected by law. There's a lot of policies and procedures. And so what a chaplain does is we exist to protect and facilitate our amendment right to religious practice and religious freedom. So we exist as protectors and facilitators of that. Even though my background is Catholic and was as a Catholic priest, but I would facilitate and make sure everyone had access to their religious freedom and religious services. Secondly, we provide religious services according to our faith background. So for my case, that would be Catholic sacraments, Catholic services on the weekend, things like that. And then a big piece of what a chaplain does is we care. We care for everyone at a command. So where I worked, where there were 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 Marines and sailors, I was the chaplain there. And so I cared for everyone. And it really is such a meaningful ministry to really care for everyone. And then the last thing that we do, well, one piece of that care is also protected by law, is what we call privileged communication. It's the highest level of confidentiality. And so a chaplain is really whatever is said there. It's a very sacred space, so people know that they can trust, and that what's said there, a chaplain is not a mandatory reporter, to say it in different ways. We don't have to report if someone's a danger to themselves or to others or anything else if they've committed a crime. It's sort of like what would be considered the Catholic confessional. And so we're protected by that confidentiality. And so it becomes a very safe place. Now, what do we do with that information? Well, we also have to deal with it in a proper way. And I'll bring up a few examples of that. So we care, and we care for everyone. Then we function as advisors to leadership. We advise senior enlisted and senior officers, and we advise them around, we offer our perspective on the human person and how to care for our people, on the command climate, the environment. So we really, if a chaplain is good at what they do, and the commanding officers and enlisted they trust the chaplain, it becomes an amazing resource, because it's a whole different insight and a view, and it's a different ear that's to the ground. And so we advise officers on how to deal with certain things, but always protecting confidentiality. And one of the people on here, Eric Adams, I served with him, and I served him. He was one of my commanding officers. So he will speak at the end. And I know this is a topic that's very close to his heart. These yellow footprints, I'll speak, a lot of what I'm going to say has to do with the Marine Corps, but again, it's very applicable to any branch. But these yellow footprints mean a lot for the Marine Corps, right? Every Marine, enlisted Marine, stands on those yellow footprints, beginning a new life. And it's a symbolism of beginning. It's something that they're honorable. I stood on those footprints. I stood on those footprints with a dream. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. It's the sort of the place where they bring death to the civilian and they bring birth to the Marine. And that happens in all the different branches, maybe not the footprints, but that same thing. But even in all of our lives, we all have that moment where we step on footprints to go to college, to go to university, to begin our first job. We get into a relationship, we get married, a committed relationship, whatever it is, we have that moment where we step on footprints and we begin something new. These are just a few images of me in my work with the Marines. I remember, and I'm going to share a few quick examples here. I remember a young Marine. I was just walking through Camp Johnson, which is in North Carolina, where I worked. A young Marine in civilian attire, he runs up to me, and he had just graduated and was headed to his next duty station. And this happened a lot at Camp Johnson. I had Marines arrive every day, and sailors, and the Marines and sailors were graduating every week to go to their duty stations. There was a very continual flow of people, very dynamic environment. We're talking 3,000 to 4,000 Marines and sailors, very high impactful ministry in my view. But they were there. A Marine or sailor was there for 3 to 8 months. And my challenge as a chaplain was to be relevant, continually be relevant to thousands of people. And that meant for me to be visible, to be available, and to be accessible. And so people would say, "Where's your office, chaplain?" I say, "Wherever my boots are, that's my office," because I have to be around with my people. So anyways, this young Marine, he smiles, he says, "Chaps," that's what they call chaplains, "Chaps, I'm so glad I saw you. I just graduated. I'm heading off to my next duty station, and I wouldn't have graduated and I wouldn't be alive as it wasn't for the time that you took to listen and support me. I was hopeless and at a very low spot. Thank you, sir." And off he went. Did I remember the face or the conversation? I didn't. But it was so meaningful what that meant to him. And like him, so many people that I will never know about, where I was there for them in a moment of need, on a weekend, late nights, early mornings, whenever it was. But due to the massive humanity I served at oftentimes a very vulnerable place in life, I have no idea of how many cases there are. What I do remember, and these are more some of the tragic situations, I do remember that my next door neighbor, who was a corporal in the Marine Corps, took his life on Memorial Day, leaving a young wife and a baby. I spent time with the wife, with the neighbors. And that same evening, I got a call to accompany a sailor who was dying of an illness that took him in a matter of 2 days. And so there, beside his wife, we offered him the last rites. Again, that wasn't suicide. One was, one wasn't, but it was a Memorial Day that's been etched in my memory. How can I forget a young Marine that was on my base for a year and was waiting to be released from the Marine Corps? And one morning, early morning, I get that dreaded phone call that he had hung himself in a bathroom early that morning. And again, that takes days, weeks of spending time with his fellow Marines to deal with the grief, the survivors, the guilt, the memories, and the loss. Another young Marine that arrived to the base that I worked at, he arrived on a Saturday, and on Sunday, he took his life by slitting his throat. A sailor that was on the base that I worked at, he left for a weekend to go on leave, went to Virginia, where he killed 2 fellow sailors and then took his own life. And again, each of those moments, the wake, and here what we're talking about the reality of suicide, but we're also talking about the reality of what that does to the people, to the survivors, to all the people around there, all the questions that they're left with, the incomprehension, the anger, the betrayal, the loss. A young female Marine that I had to accompany, and really because of our faith tradition, she looked for a Catholic chaplain, and so it was to accompany her in viewing the corpse of her husband who had taken his life while she was traveling. Her disbelief, her anger with the command, her anger with their unit chaplain and the way things have been managed. And the first day that I arrived, fresh from chaplain school, arrived to my duty station, I show up, and that morning, a staff sergeant, an instructor of young Marines, had taken his life. And all the theory that we learned in chaplain school became real really quick. This had shaken up the school, the leadership, the fellow enlisted Marines, the fellow instructors. And this was a Marine that had seemed to have everything all together. His dad was still a Marine. He had a family. He was always happy, upbeat. He smiled. He was living the dream, as lots of Marines like to say. Maybe he had a few challenges, but he had it all under control, which is sort of that facade that we all like to show. So the unique world of the armed forces is very unique, but so beautiful. It's a massive mass of humanity that have all joined for different reasons. They have all joined to serve. They're the less than 1% of our country that stand up to serve. High quality people, generous, caring, fun. Some of the strongest bonds that I've ever seen among human beings. And so doing this becomes their life. It becomes all encompassing, a mix of who you are and what you do all in one. And then it's reinforced by the mentality, the culture. And so, and there's an attractive appeal to this. And we can all, I think we can resonate with the attractive appeal, but also with the danger. If it's not the right fit, or if we don't deal, as the last speaker was talking about, if we can't bring our humanity to work and deal with it, something's going to go sideways. So we all step on those yellow footprints in life to begin a journey, and plans can change. Situations can come our way. And this is an image I like to use because in all of us, and I would use this, with young Marines, I would speak to them every week when they would arrive to the base about what it means to be a chaplain, and then the reality of things that we face in life. Sometimes we feel like we hit a dead end. When we talk about grief and loss doesn't just have to do with life, but it has to, death and life, but it has to do with a lot of things that happen in our life where we feel like we run into a brick wall. This actually came to me when I took time out when I was in ministry to do a lot of personal work. I went to inpatient care because I felt like I had run into a brick wall. And for me, it was figuring out what was on the other side. So a lot of my conversations with Marines was, how do we take those bricks piece by piece away and begin to see hope again, begin to see what's on the other side, that there is a path. And as I say, suicide or anything, it never happens in a vacuum. So what's going on around this is there's stress. We have the noise and trauma in our heads, whether it be from combat or whether it be from things that happen to these young soldiers, Marines, airmen, sailors when they were growing up. A lot of them they bring their past with them. And I was at a place at the base where I worked, I was at a place where there was the first time that maybe they had time to think about their past and begin to deal with it. They have accountability, right? There's actions and then there's mistakes and then there's accountability for those. And that can be like a wall. There's a loss of identity. Maybe if I can't serve anymore, an abrupt end to my career, my dreams, my plans. Again, these are all different walls that we can face, or it can be relationship is very linked to the taking of people's lives in the military and probably outside the military. But I know that in the military, there's a lot of times relationship, alcohol is very often involved in the moment of when they take their life. And we would understand the reasons why. And some people have, that they feel like they have nothing to go home to. So if for some reason they can't continue to serve, those are some situations and some triggers. Other triggers that might happen in the military is when you're on hold, when you because you're waiting for training or waiting for a duty assignment where you just have to wait. That's what I would call a vulnerable position. When you're on legal hold because you're being investigated for something or something's gone on and you're part of that, doesn't mean that you're at fault, but you're just part of something, and so you can't work or you can't be moved to the next duty station. You're on legal hold, or you're on hold because of health reasons. And those are just difficult moments because you didn't join the military to sit around. You joined the military to do something and do something big and constructive. So just being on hold, and obviously legal hold has a very special stressor on your mind. And when you're being punished, punished whether in big ways or small ways, that's a vulnerable population. When your family's going through challenges and stress, right, at home, that makes you vulnerable. Relationship challenges, problems back at home in your home of origin, and baggage from the past, which no one knows about, that can make you very vulnerable. Missing a promotion, not being promoted, a decision that you can no longer serve, that you have to be separated. So all these things are triggers that can make a very vulnerable population. And in the Marine Corps, but also in the other branches, in the Marine Corps and Navy, it was called force preservation. So it's just this, a Marine or sailor or soldier, you'd be put on a list that because you're in a vulnerable situation, there's more attention that's shown, and the chaplain is aware of that, and the staff is aware of that. So we're checking in on people, we're closer to people, we're having conversations, we make sure we're engaging. One last thing, which when I would speak to the Marines, I would talk about M&Ms because it's just an easy way to remember, is meaning and motivation. Our motivation as human beings, wherever we are, it's very linked to our meaning, our purpose. And when meaning is lost or it becomes invisible for a while, then it directly affects our motivation. And so I would talk to our people about losing our M&Ms, and then how do we recover those? In the military, as you know, there's a huge focus on mission. It's all about mission accomplishment, and it's about mission readiness. And sadly, what can happen is what I noticed in the Marine Corps, in the military, is that sometimes suicide, because people know that it's a way that they can get out, not taking their life, but suicidal ideation or saying that they want to do it, sadly, it gets manipulated, which again is very offensive to the sacredness of the topic. But that and in other fields, people can manipulate information because they no longer want to serve. We'll move on to our next point here. This is, what the punishments looks like. Since a lot of you aren't familiar with the military, well, these are because of the U.S., because of the military code of law, they're held to higher standards, right? So there's different things that you do, and you get caught. Well, there's fines. There's restriction, means you can't leave base. You can't, you have to stay in uniform. You can't wear civilian attire on the weekends or off hours. You have to report in every few hours. So these different things that happen, that because they're held to not only civil law, but to military law, which has higher standards. So these are just examples of things. Again, I'm just trying to give you a window into this light, into kind of this world. And now I want to share a few considerations on the process, the culture, the mentality of what my observations. And there was a piece that I wrote on considerations of suicide in the military, so I take some from that. And I go back to, what does the Marine Corps do? What do all the branches do? In the Marine Corps, they say, they make Marines. In the Army, they make soldiers. In the Navy, they make sailors, right? The Air Force, they make airmen. The Marines are very big about this. We make Marines, we win wars, and we return quality citizens. And when I would brief Marines and officers and all, I would say, all right, we make Marines, but what is a Marine? And these young Marines, they would stand up and say, it's a killing machine. And I said, wait. Before you're killing, who are you? What are you? And then we're human beings. And so that's obviously my ministry. My focus very much on the human element, as we've been talking about. We are first and foremost human beings. And the whole circle of making a Marine who's not only a better Marine, but a better human being. And then returning quality citizens. We want people to return better, not more broken. And so that's the circle and that was sort of my continual message with our people. And again, I think a lot of these principles, they apply to a lot of sectors. My job here is to give you a window a little bit into the military. So if mission is first, the big question is, well, what do we do with our humanity? And again, this happens in the corporate world. This happens in the faith world. Again, different applications, but when mission and identity is first, what do we do with everything else? So in the military, we receive young men and women, usually at a very young age, from society. And being young means that naturally that they're not fully developed, that they're not fully integrated and aligned. They're in a process of maturing and growing. Oftentimes the recruit comes from an unstable upbringing. And again, I don't have data to back this up. But I think, the way society's gone is very interesting. We've grown, we've become modern in many ways and advanced, but the loneliness and the fragility of the human person is very interesting to see. That it seems like we've gone backwards. Right? And I think a lot has to do with the stability of the home and the family and all that. Again, I don't have data here to back that up. But a lot of organizations, as what Danica was saying before this, a lot of organizations and the military, they now seem faced with the fact that we no longer hire someone to fulfill a mission, but we hire a whole person that we also have to help be a better person. It adds a lot to the mission of the military. Like, that's not our problem. Well, but all of a sudden it becomes our problem when we have all this other stuff that's going on, when people are taking their lives, when there's a lot of substance abuse, when there's violence, when a lot of laws are being broken. We're like, all of a sudden this begins to become our problem. And I have to say, I was very impressed with the amount of programs that are there to help people in the military be better human beings. Now, are they utilized as often as I wish they? No, probably not, because again, of the mentality I'm going to speak to right now. But it is amazing. The Department of Defense, the branches, everything that they put out there to help our armed forces, our people in service, not only be good at their mission, but grow into better human beings. So as I was saying, oftentimes the recruit comes from an unstable upbringing, a difficult social framework, a challenging family structure, perhaps with subpar education, and then there's the Generation Z and all that, the millennials, Generation Z, and the recruit, they're not commonly educated in relationship skills and parenting skills. None of us really are. There's no mandatory training for committed relationships or for being parents, right? They're not trained in life skills. And then they're put in this position where they become part of the most elite fighting force in the world. As the Marines would say, the few and the proud. They go through 13 tough weeks of recruit training boot camp that will make them what we would call an entry-level Marine, soldier, sailor. And then a Marine goes through Marine combat training, which will give us a rifleman. And then their MOS, which is military occupational specialty training, will give them what we would call a fleet-ready Marine or fleet-ready sailor, soldier. These levels of training give us someone who's ready for their mission and for combat, but not necessarily grounded, aligned, and what I would say a life-ready Marine, a life-ready soldier, a life-ready sailor. That's still a journey. But of course, because of their mission, they're taught to believe that they're the best, that they're the strongest, they're elite, and rightly so, because we need a force that is confident and strong. But a young Marine or soldier or sailor, they step into a culture and mentality that is built around peer pressure. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of shame-based motivation. Perception is really important. Acceptance, the fear of rejection, according to just a lot of invisible standards and values. And therein lies the unspoken erroneous logic that being human equals weakness. Weakness is unacceptable. Therefore, being human is unacceptable. And again, what I said before, a brief parenthesis, what I'm saying here can be applied to, I think, a lot of organizations. Again, in the corporate world, in the religious world, there's a lot of that. What I said, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of perception, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of pressures. And we feel like we have to turn off a lot of, and I speak from experience as a priest, I felt like I had to turn off a lot of aspects of my humanity. And that, at some point, that's going to send a very expensive bill. And in our context here, what we're talking about, that a very expensive bill is someone taking their life. An image I also like to use with Marines, or with anyone really, is this image about the environment, the mentality, the culture, the environment, the unspoken things that aren't the values of the military or of an organization, but what it does to us is it ties our hands so that we cannot raise our hands. So there's this unconscious silent voice that proclaims that it's unacceptable to raise your hand and to ask for support, because it means that you're weak, that you have a problem, or that you are a problem, and that is unacceptable. So we stuff our problems in a closet and we hope that they resolve themselves. And the closet gets filled. And as we know, that there's some things that when we put them in the closet into darkness, they don't just stay there and maybe get stagnant and begin to go bad, but they grow. And that's why that sacred place as a chaplain, where I would sit, is it's bringing those things into the light, where they have less power over us. And so those challenges turn into crisis, and a crisis into a variety of visible problems that takes a lot of energy from leadership to deal with, leaving a lot of destruction in its wake. And so when being a human becomes acceptable, and when it's held accountable, a healthy clarity begins to reign. When we serve our humanity will serve us very well and will serve our country and will serve our family and our loved ones. When we care for our humanity will care for us. The apparent contradictions that we're faced with in the armed forces is that we're committed to bring death and destruction to the enemy, foreign and domestic. Yet if we look at the last 20 years of war against terrorism, more people have been hurt, more people have been harmed, and more people have died in our own bases, in our own camps, at our own homes, in our own barracks than in combat. And when I would bring this up to the young Marines and sailors and to officers, that their eyes would go open and whoa, and we never thought of it that way. Where we end up bringing more hurt to our own people than to the enemy. And again, I'm speaking of the broader picture of violence, aggression, sexual assaults, alcohol abuse, substance abuse, and all the different things that can lead to. But death occurs through murder, accident, suicide. Hurt and harm occurs not exclusively, but through physical and sexual assaults, mismanagement of anger, aggression, training accidents, incidents involving substance abuse. And those issues are all part of the bigger conversation. Right? And then we have suicidal ideation and completion. A few quick numbers, they might be a year or two old, but they can help give us an idea. That 1,231 Marines suffered combat-related deaths between 2001 and 2016. 426 Marines lost to suicide since 2012. When I was looking for these, when I did my article on this, I was looking for, it was kind of hard to find all the accurate numbers. But there's a few more that you might find revealing. 7,070 service members were killed in the post 9/11 war operations. So we're going on about 20 years of that. An estimated 30,177 active duty personnel and veterans of the post 9/11 wars have died by suicide. This number I got from a study from someone from Boston University, which was from last year. Again, estimated, hard to to prove all those, but that was the number that this author came up with. So how do we deal with our pain? How do we deal with our pain? And that's the big question for us as human beings in any sector, is how we deal with our pain. And suicide is one of the ways that we deal with our pain. But can we find healthier ways to deal with our pain? And a few things that I would bring up directly is, I had to be very upfront. Do you want to kill yourself? And I would put it on a spectrum. Like, do you wish you just weren't alive right now because of what you're going through? Or do you want to take your life? There's two different ways then to deal with that. And then if you want to take your life, what is your plan? What's your plan? And if they have a plan, well, it needs much, the situation changes quickly. And if they don't have a plan, well, there's some more conversing to have. Thankfully, in the military, there's a mechanism in place where I could personally bring a soldier, Marine, a sailor to the mental health ward in the hospital, where they would be for a few days and get the attention that they needed, gain clarity. All the dangers are taken away from them, right? They're in a very safe space where they can deal with it. And I was a big promoter of that. But the mentality around that was, no one wanted to go there. But it ended up saving so many lives and helping people not only face the reality, but then just become much better human beings and to grow. And another thing is, 5 years down the road, I would ask them, how do you want to, when you look back on this situation, how would you like to see yourself having dealt with it? And sort of envision where they want to be down the road. Or also, what is worth living for right now? And again, sadly, some people didn't have, when you're deep down in the dumps, you don't, there might not be enough, there might be nothing worth living for. So anyways, these, again, those are a few things, a few tools. Hopefully I gave you a quick view of the culture, the mentality, the beauty of service that all these people offer, the challenges. And now I'm going to hand it over to two people that are continue to serve. Colonel Adams, Colonel in the Marine Corps. Again, as I said before, I was able to serve with him and support his work as commander. And then Edward Bodenheimer, he also goes by Trip, and he's a Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force. So they're going to share a few reflections around this and also around personal experiences. So I'll pass the word over to Eric and then to Edward.
Hey, thanks, Matthew. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hey, thanks for having me on today. Thank you to the team for putting this together, and for really all the folks on the line. Thank you for your commitment to continuing to support in this really important endeavor. I listened to Matthew's his introduction as a friend, and I would tell you, as impressive as his resume is, he's a much better person in real life even. So that's I'm a big fan of his. And I can never repay him for the support that he provided to me personally, to my family, and to the Marines and sailors that we served with together there at Camp Johnson. So I would ask you to excuse me as I speak over the next few minutes. And, you know, if I talk about Marines or the Marines, know that I'm talking about members in general, servicemen and women. It's just my default. After all these years, I'm going to talk about Marines, as hard as I try not to. And then just the last thing that I always have to give just kind of the caveat that, you know, I'm speaking from my personal perspective and as a person, and not as a member or representative of the DoD today, which is just a really important differentiation, because it really allows me to speak freely and kind of from my heart, as opposed to maybe some things that are required of me. So I would just say good afternoon. Again, my name is Eric Adams, and I've served in the Marine Corps for the last 26 years. I'm an officer. And I've commanded at the platoon, the company, the battalion, and the regimental levels. I've had responsibility for upwards to 2,000 Marines. I'm a veteran of the wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I've operationally served in Europe, Central America, Africa, and the Pacific. And I say all that not to brag on myself, but to tell you that during this entire time, I've also experienced suicide, both personally and professionally, through family members, and more specifically with the Marines that I've served. So I'm going to make a few points here today. And the first is something, and I think most of this, I'm going to regurgitate a lot of what Matthew said, because I think we come from a position of a very similar perspective, just different positions of authority. And so the first thing I would say is that Marines are products of their environment. And that's something that never needs to be forgotten. We come from all walks of life. We come from across the country, cities, suburbs, rural countrysides. We come from great families who love us. We were raised by that nuclear family. We were raised by single parents. We were raised in the foster system. We were loved and we were abused. We were all of those things. And so we bring that with us when we enter the Marine Corps, when we enter service, when we step on those yellow footprints that Matthew was talking about. And we do that seeking that transformation that Matthew talked about. And I want to talk about the transformation just for a minute, because we are absolutely convinced as a service, as a nation, that we take good people, we take good human beings, and we make them better. We fundamentally make folks better. Because we've applied to them tried and true methods that probably seem awful extreme to folks on the outside who haven't experienced it. But we go to great lengths to and indoctrinate's not the right word, but when you're providing, you know, a quality of characteristics and things that you want out of people to come out of the end of it, it all makes sense to us. And I'm a big believer in the transformation. but I also believe the transformation can erase 18 to 20 some years of culture, socialization, and the nature and nurture they were brought up in, right? These Marines, these servicemen and women, they're not supermen and women. We're subject to the same emotions and struggles as everyone else. We have the same risk factors. The young Marines have the same risk factors as their peers entering the workforce, the junior college, the university. But in joining the Marine Corps, they've left home. Often for the first time, they've traveled across the country in many cases, subjected themselves to the most challenging, really physical, emotional, and mental training that really is imaginable. And the last piece of this that we forget is that they understand, and as an institution, we continually reinforce and remind them of the real possibilities of a deployment into a hostile and uncertain environment, where death is a real possibility, right? So we've placed this all on these individuals, and then we put that cherry on top of the cake for them. So what's so special or unique about combating and treating suicide in the military? And I've got three things that I just want to talk about real quick, and none of these should come as a surprise. And none of these are, I think, special to us, but I think we have a special relationship with all three of these topic areas that just bear understanding. And that's the idea of isolation, which Matthew touched on a little bit. This idea of failure, which I think we define differently than your average citizen of the world. And then the last and really the most obvious and far-reaching for me is this idea of alcohol abuse and misuse. So why do we join the military? There's a huge range of reasons why people join the military. I'm very sensitive to this, what I think is a misconception that it's the lowest rungs of society are who join the Marine Corps. I find that very offensive. And there's absolutely a large group of individuals who have come out of really bad circumstances, and they've used the military to raise themselves out of there. But I don't think it's as widespread as people would think, right? We've got some really great human beings, my son being one of them, who had all the options in the world, graduating from high school, college, athletic scholarships and opportunities to do things. And he chose a life of service because he felt like it was the right thing to do. So he, and again, I'm obviously one-sided on this, but an exceptional human being who said, this is a thing that I'm going to choose to do. And so I hate to see him painted with that same brush that in maybe popular media or culture, we paint these young servicemen with. And talk about isolation a little bit. And this is obviously probably a blinding flash of the obvious, but right, we're separated from our friends and family back home. What folks don't think about is this idea that even a move inside of the military, away from a structure, a support structure that they finally found, maybe something that they've been. We talk about family and we talk about team and we talk these things. We talk about them very positive light with the young Marines. And I see it in faces sometimes that people haven't had good experiences with family groups and teams. And so that's not something that resonates with them, but maybe it has for the first time in the military. So to move them away from that, a significant stressor, very easy to get isolated, even in an organization with 2,000 people that are really choosing that same path. And then the second piece of this that I'm personally not familiar with, but I've seen it in friends and coworkers, is this idea of separating from the service and the isolation that causes. We talk about, the Marine Corps has a poster that talks about we didn't promise you a rose garden, right? And there's an awful lot of folks that live in the rose garden we've created for them, and they're not very happy there. Call it unmet expectations. Unrealistic expectations, and so we'll joke about a young Marine is only at his best as a Marine 5 or 10 years after service is over. He's a better Marine, she's a better Marine after they've separated than when they were in the service, because they remember fondly the things that were made available to them. And they miss that, right? They miss that brotherhood. They miss that ability to be amongst their peers. They miss that higher level of discipline and expectation that maybe they didn't enjoy at the time but they realized in hindsight it was something that was really, really good for them. The second topic I want to talk about just real quick is this idea of failure. So being a Marine, being a service member in a lot of circles, it's a big deal. I know for me, the longer I stick around, the bigger a deal it is for my family that I'm still in the Marine Corps, because you continue to achieve these higher levels of, call it prestige, if you will. But what comes with that is a great deal of responsibility and expectations. So when you are placed on this pedestal, when you're placed on this platform by your culture, by the society in which you live inside of the military, by your family, to fall from that, it's a really long way to fall. And I personally know Marines that fall was too much. And Matthew talked about the Uniform Code of Military Justice quickly. And I will tell you that, as a Marine, as a service member, there are laws that apply to me that don't apply to the general public. The one that always is kind of an obvious one to me, because this is played out in a friend's life of mine, is this idea of adultery. And I don't think there's anywhere in our society, at least, that considers adultery a good thing. But in my culture, in my organization, adultery is a crime. And it's a crime that is punishable like any other crime that exists in the world. But what also comes with it is an embarrassment, is a fall from grace, is a loss of prestige, is a loss of position. It's a loss of financial stability that goes well beyond divorce. So we've lost all those things. And there are Marines that I know personally that they've experienced that. They put themselves in that situation and thought of facing those people, facing those friends, facing the people who looked up to them. It's just too much. And suicide became the only option for them, unfortunately. And I've got several stories like that, where I'm failing at my job. I'm achieving at this level. I can't have people know that I'm not this perfect person that everyone thought that I was. And so they do the last thing that I'll talk about here, which is they take alcohol and they use it as the lubricant that allows them to make a very poor choice. That in the grand scheme, again, in hindsight, I'm sure is a very foolish notion. But what I would talk about here is this idea that, so if I'm not a Marine and I'm not the Marine that people think I am, what really am I? And I think we have a special relationship with that idea, because we belong to organizations where if I stepped out of my barracks or my workspace and I asked to see how many people have branded their body with a tattoo saying I am a Marine, the numbers are really high. And I think if I went to Walmart and asked the same question, I wouldn't see an awful lot of folks with Walmart tattoos or General Motors or whoever it is. So that speaks to me, to the culture of it. And then the last thing that I won't spend a lot of time on, because I think everyone in this room has got a better perspective and a better clinical understanding than I do, is the idea of alcohol. The military has a certain reputation, probably a bunch of drunken sailors, or whatever the phrase is, and so it's commonly accepted, and it becomes something that we've taken into the culture, and it's obviously at the levels in which it's detrimental to health and good order and discipline. It becomes an issue, and in every case that I know where suicide became an option for an individual Marine, alcohol was absolutely involved. And it wasn't just alcohol, it was the abuse of alcohol. So we have really two things to address there. And just the last thing I want to talk about real quick, and hand the floor over, is this idea that Matthew touched on it just a little bit, but the resources that we've made available to these young people, I think, and I don't think we as a military get enough credit for it. You can't replicate those anywhere else in society, the things that we've made available to these young people. Whether it's the alcohol treatment, again, we have spiritual advisors in every organization. We have the people that we call military family life counselors that are licensed practical social workers and the like, that are embedded into organizations. We have medical doctors in almost every large organization that exists out there. And then say what you will about maybe the effectiveness of it, but we offer a great deal of training individually and as an organization to individuals. And then just the last thing I'll say, because I'm a part of it right this minute, is at our enterprise level. This is taken very seriously to the point where I'll be hosting some high level folks next week that are part of a suicide prevention and response independent review committee from the Department of Defense. Right. So these are very high level folks coming out to the various organizations, and they're really trying to understand better. Rather than ask the colonels what the issue is and how to fix it, they want to go out and they want to get down to what we call that deck plate level, where the young Marines are at, and the different groups. They're going to meet with providers, healthcare providers, mental health providers, and try to get a better understanding of this. So at an enterprise level, we can understand better how to deal with this thing, because it's detrimental. I'll finish where Matthew kind of started. It's detrimental to mission readiness, right? When we have to deal with these issues, when we have to deal with the loss that's created. So if nothing else, at a very practical level, and this is much more than a practical issue for the vast majority of us, it's a very emotionally charged an important issue, but at the very practical level, this is detrimental to good order and discipline. It's detrimental to mission readiness, which is what our government pays us to do, to be ready to deploy and to go do the nation's bidding. And so with that, I would say thank you for the opportunity to address you. Thank you all for your continued service on this important topic. And I will yield the floor over to Tripp. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Edward, Tripp. So he's I don't want to take any of his minutes, but he also has a podcast if you're ever interested. The Shadows podcast. He had me on there. It's a great also resource for just life stories. Tripp, off you go. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, first of all, I am Tripp Bodenheimer, Edward Charles Bodenheimer III, hence Tripp. I'm currently a Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force. So I'm kind of the outlier here. I'm the Air Force guy. But it's also tough following those two that just spoke, Matthew and Eric. But I want to thank everybody for allowing me this opportunity, this platform, to have a couple of minutes of your time and to share with you my perspective from my time in the Air Force. I'm also going to say I'm not representing the Air Force. I'm not in uniform doing this. This is just my personal experience and my personal story and strategies that I want to share with each of you. I'm currently stationed in Montgomery, Alabama. I spent 6 years in Germany. Then I came to Alabama. In my opinion, that wasn't the most fair trade-off in the world, but not against anybody out there from Alabama. But I love my time in the Air Force. I love the connections that I've made. I'm very fortunate. I have a position as an enlisted professional military education instructor, and I teach at the instructor course. And basically, every 5 to 6 weeks, we get a whole handful of new instructors that come through. We teach them how to teach, basically, and they go back out into the Air Force and teach, future supervisors, flight chiefs. So the footprint that we have is incredible. We're impacting thousands of people each and every class that we push through. And I also like to tell people I have gone to mental health. I tell all my students that as well. I've told them that from the very beginning, that this is something we need to address more. Suicide prevention is something we need to address more. And one of the things that I like to do with my students, actually did it with them last week, because they can pass this down to more and more people, is I just walk in one day and I have a Jenga board sitting there, and they have to start stacking the pieces up. And the Jenga piece gets wobbly. Eventually, everyone's like, I don't want to be the one to knock it over. And then it falls. And when it falls, I start picking up the pieces. Everybody's laughing and smiling. I said, what y'all didn't see under it was these risk factors and warning signs. And I've written on every single block: financial issues, relationship issues, performance reports due, last minute taskings. And you as the supervisor kept stacking all of this stuff on top of this person. And eventually it just fell over. And it definitely changes the tone, because they get to see, wow, I didn't, even though we were holding that piece, we didn't flip it over and really see what was going on. And that's something they've started to spread out there just for every class that they have. And suicide is so important to me because at a younger age, when I was, 14, 15 years old, I had a younger sister who attempted to take her life several times. And it was hard for me because I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't have the tools or the resources as a 15-year-old. My resort was to, what are you doing, to criticize her, to get on her for that, which is wrong. And I realized that, especially the older I got, and when I joined the military, that was the only experience I really had dealing with someone and suicide. So one of the first times that I had interacted with someone in the military was walking out of a door on a Friday afternoon. This person got a prestigious position and was talking to me. I had a heritage hall that I was upkeeping, and they said, "Hey, I got some stuff for you. I definitely want to give it to you, definitely help you out. I could do some tours. I could do whatever." Very motivated. And I said, "Yeah, let's hit me up on Facebook. Let's shoot each other a text. Let's work together." Left pretty excited. And Monday, he never made it into work. And he had taken his life over the weekend. And I never saw it coming. And people were asking me, they're like, "You talked to him on his way out of work." So that right there was a huge eye opener for me. That even though, like, we all wear these masks day in and day out, you never really understand what someone's going through unless you ask the right questions. And some of the stats that I have, the military is one of the most stressful jobs in the world. I think every year it's consistently a top 5, top 10 most stressful job. 23 to 30 for the Air Force. The age of 23 to 30 are the most likely age range for those individuals to lose their lives to suicide, most likely single men, and rank of E1 to E4. And to put that into perspective, in civilian terms, it's usually the first 4 or 5 years of your career. And it was really tough in Germany because you have a lot of those individuals falling in that age range who are now sent overseas, away from family, the holidays, the pandemic. There were so many different things that were going on to where, and different diverse backgrounds as well, to where it could impact that. Some other numbers, there was more than 100 suicides in the Air Force in 2019 and 2020, and they dropped by 30% in 2021, which goes to show that we are making strides in the right direction with some of the resources. I know both of them have mentioned resources, and that's something that I 100% agree. I think the military has a vast amount of resources available for those individuals who do need some help. And some of the strategies I want to throw out there for y'all that we like to do in the Air Force is, first, we love acronyms in the military. I don't know if you know that, but we love us some acronyms. The first is ACE, and the A stands for ask. Like Matthew said, don't be afraid to ask a tough question when you're talking to someone. We actually train one another not to say, "Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of harming yourself?" We're taught, are you considering taking your life? Because to them, hurting yourself, harming yourself, no, I'm in pain going through these day in, day out experiences. This would be a way out for me. So we're told to definitely ask that. Care, show them that you care for them. When I taught Airman Leadership School, one of the things I did was, I believe life doesn't give you a roll card. I didn't have any roll card playing. I would sit someone down. I'm like, "You're the supervisor. You've got to ask the tough questions." Have someone in the hallway. I'm like, "You're the subordinate. Only open up and tell them if you really see that they care for you. If you feel like they're going through the motions, you're not going to open up. That's real life." So you really got to show them you care for them, and then escort, take them to the right place. I like to say that being in, even just being a friend or a supervisor, what have you, when someone comes to you with a problem, I like to equate it like being a quarterback in football. They're going to give you that football. What do you do with it? Do you hand it off to the right person? Do you throw it to the base agency that is your receiver? Or do you, if you hang on to it for too long and don't get them that help, or ignore those agencies and that running back, you're going to get sacked. And that could be catastrophic for that individual. So always try to get them, escort them to where they need to get to. And one of the ones that we teach in professional military education that I believe is a good addition to the ACE model is laugh, don't cry, LAFF. But laugh is very similar to ACE as a whole. It's listen, empathize, A, ask questions, F, focus on the problem at hand, and then find the first step. So it's very similar. But what I like to add with it is that don't cry piece, which is don't criticize them, which I told you I was guilty of doing with my sister when I was at a younger age. "Why are you doing this? What is wrong with you?" Don't ever criticize them. And then also don't react hastily. One of the things in the military, we have security clearances. We have our rank. We have cops who, "I don't want to lose my weapon. I don't want to." you cannot promise them, hey, this isn't going to impact your career. But on the flip side of that, I would rather have you with us than and be a civilian, and the Air Force is just not for you, than for you not to be here at all. So don't make those promises. And then the why for CRY is yakety yak. Don't just sit there and talk, because more times than not, they want you to come in and just listen to them and not say, well, I've been through something similar, I have a situation. Just sit back and listen. And the final thing I'll say is, there was someone who during my time in Germany came to me, asked to speak to me. And it was a Friday afternoon, had plans with the family, and sit him down, and he just sat there. And we sat there for about a total of 4 hours. Didn't grab my phone, didn't text my wife, tell her, hey, I'm going to be late. I just gave this individual my undivided attention, and we sat there, and he would start talking for a minute or two, and then he would just break down crying. And I took him to the chaplain. Eventually, that's where he wanted to go. I contacted his commander, told his commander, hey, this individual is going through some stuff. Commander gave him open door policy. He said, I don't care if I'm in a briefing, you come in and grab me, and you're going to be more important than the mission. I just need you to be safe and healthy. And I planted the seeds, but I never really saw the tree grow. I never really knew what had happened with this individual. And then 4 years later, when I was out processing, we had my going away party, and he came up and hugged me. And he said to me, you saved my life. You may not have seen it, but you just sat there with me for 4 hours. You got me the help I needed. And ultimately you saved my life. And to me, that was more, hearing those words was more important than any plaque, any award, any promotion, anything that I've ever received in my career. And I asked him, I said, well, what was it? And he's like, you just cared. You just cared, and you just sat there and listened to me, and you got me help, and I felt it. It didn't feel forced. I actually felt it. And you put everything else to the side. Nothing else was more important than me sitting right there in front of you. So that meant a lot to me. That really helped me. And just as Matthew said, that kind of motivated me to do the podcast, because I have people on there that share very similar stories of things they've gone through, because you never know when you could listen to someone and they could have a similar experience as you. And it could ultimately save you to see that someone's been through something just like you have. And one of my most recent ones was Kevin Hines, who attempted to take his life by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he's on there sharing his story about how he overcame that and all the amazing things he's doing today. But once again, want to thank each and every one of you for having me on here to do this. This is a really cool experience for me. And Matthew, I guess I'll turn things back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Trip. Thank you, Eric. I threw 2 links in the chat. One is his podcast. Another one is a small poem that I wrote on my way out of my time in service, which you might appreciate. And over to you, Michael. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and thank you so much, Edward and Eric and Matthew, especially, for organizing this. Nadine?
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, you guys. That was absolutely extraordinary. I have no words to even express the gratitude for all of you coming today and sharing all of your stories and insight and wisdom. And yeah, I could go on and on and on, but I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here today, for all you do, for all you've done, and all you will continue to do. So thank you so much. Our gratitude from the entire, CSA group, our summit, everybody here. Thank you for your presence and being here today.